Kibezi. This place made a deep, indelible impression on me, so much so that for me, my time in Burundi is Kibezi. I have to think hard to bring any of the other places there to mind. That's a lot for a place that hadn't existed. Well, at least not before the camps. Just south of the capital, Bujumbura, along the Lake Highway, there had been nothing but manioc fields. Nothing until October 1999, when the government created a camp there into which it forced 50,000 people of the opposing ethnic group. It was one of a dozen such camps around the capital. As a humanitarian aid worker, I've seen things which have affected me, some quite profoundly, some whose effects I'm only now beginning to realize and deal with. The ghosts of some of those experiences haunt me today. This is one of them. I was managing the program providing water to the people of Kibezi, as well as several other camps in the area surrounding the capital. Not an easy proposition, given that all the camps were established on elevated ground with no water sources nearby. The only feasible option was to set up temporary water systems and supply them with tanker trucks. This solution was not ideal, however. The trucks could only go to the camps on days when the security conditions, that is the war, allowed access, which was perhaps 4 or 5 days a week. Kibezi was stunningly beautiful. Every time I visited the camp, I was struck by the beauty of the surroundings. As I stood on the crest at its center, on 3 sides were rolling hills, layered one behind the other into the distance, interspersing dozens of shades of green. On the 4th was the lake. Lake Tanganyika looked glittering and inviting, with the slightly mysterious-seeming mountains of Congo visible on the other side. It seemed like a picture postcard view of paradise, at least if I looked out from it and did not linger on the details of what was close to me, because Kibezi was about as far from paradise as could be imagined. That day in late November, as we drove up the hill into the heart of Kibezi camp, a pall of smoke hung in the air close to the ground. With all the cooking fires crowded in the densely packed camp, it was not unusual to smell smoke strongly, particularly in the mornings after the food preparation. But this was different. It seemed stronger, more acrid, stinging the eyes more than the normal daily smoke. The driver parked the Land Rover near the crest of the hill, close to the newly installed water tank, and I sat for a moment in the cab, trying to figure out what was different. Then it came to me. This wasn't the smell of normal cooking fire smoke. It smelled like burnt hair. I stepped out of the truck, and it was immediately apparent that something was up. There were no children crowding around me to dance and sing, as there were most mornings when I arrived at the camp. I rounded the water tank and stepped up on the slight rise to the highest point in the camp and saw what had happened. Below me, down the steep slope, where the day before there had been perhaps 50 small huts, only a blackened tangle of smoking remains could be seen. A few dozen people picked their way gingerly through the wreckage to see if there was anything salvageable. The fire, started by someone's breakfast cooking, had obviously spread quickly in the densely packed labyrinth of cardboard boxes and scrap wood huts. I wondered whether there had been many people hurt, and was just about to ask a passerby when a commotion started with the approach of a young woman coming from the other side of camp. In contrast to the stunned, slow-motion movement of the others making their way through the ruins, she moved with agitation and purpose. Moaning audibly, she clambered over the remains of huts and stopped at a spot just below where I was standing. She began to dig through the wreckage frantically with her bare hands. After a few minutes, she stopped, staggered backwards, and collapsed to her knees, wailing, a low, guttural howl. Others converged on her, the women gathering around to comfort her as the men turned to where she had been digging. They pulled out a small bundle wrapped in rags, quickly taking it away from where the women were huddled, toward where I stood on the rise above the road. Looking down, I could see the baby, almost unrecognizable as human, burnt pink, writhing in its rags, unable to cry, barely able to breathe. I prayed to a God I did not believe in to take this child quickly, now. I hesitated, wondering what to do, what I could do. As the men turned away and walked towards the chief's hut, I realized that as an outsider, there was nothing for me to do, that this was not my concern. They could and would deal with it themselves. My assistant Ferdinand clambered up beside me and asked how many workers we would need for the trench, and I turned away from the scene below me to the day's work.